it's important to note on this side of the house that we are not saying that cultural experience or the immersion of yourself in a particular culture means that you're automatically acquitted from a crime. What we are saying on this side of the house is that we believe it should be the ability to lodge a defence when you are being prosecuted for a particular crime, that you are able to use the diminishment of your agency due to the place in which, or the culture in which you are immersed and being brought up, as a way in which you can try and mitigate the circumstances or the actions that you've committed. We're going to be looking at a couple of things in this. First, I'll be looking at the relationship between intent and agency and why that matters under law in a jurisprudential type of way. And secondly, why it is that your cultural upbringing has the impact of restricting your agency and therefore providing a legitimate defence that isn't necessarily an acquittal when it comes to the legal system. Before that, quite an extensive definition. Because what we're saying, we're looking at where this is going to be committed. We are saying that this will be in functioning democracies, whereas they allow protection of human rights, as well as correct due process in order to make sure that people are being treated in a fair and just way in terms of the legal proceedings. Secondly, we're saying that the types of crimes we are looking at, we think at the severe end, we're thinking about things like honour killings, and in the less severe things, we're looking at, for example, employers breaching anti-discrimination legislation. What we are saying, though, is with this, we are not saying accepting this as a defence, or as a defence, is the same as being acquitted of a crime, right? It does not mean that when you lodge this defence, you will not be found guilty of it. It is saying that it is something which can be brought in and used as a legal defence when it is that you're in court with it. We say, for example, it could be... let me finish, right? Maybe I'll answer your question. We're saying that, like, it could, for example, lead to a less severe punishment as opposed to a not as severe, not dealing with that. We're saying that, for example, it can be the downgradings. Usually when people are put on trial, they are posted with a range of different accusations, and this is maybe moving it from a murder to a manslaughter type thing when it comes to an honour killing. That's the sort of thing that we're talking about. It has that clear up.
Clarification.
Go for it.
What do you have to prove when you're launching that line of defense? Do you have to prove that your culture is violent? Do you have to prove that you were coerced in that culture? What do you have to prove?
You probably need to prove, right, that you meet a set range of criteria deciding on the particular state that it is about what the particular crime is and what you need to get through. We think that it will tend to be that you're particularly culturally, you were immersed in that culture, that it hasn't had a massive impact on the way in which you operate, that you live your life, and therefore how you acted in a particular situation. Like, that's up for them to prove. We think it's a legitimate one. If they're able to do that, then it should be used in defence. Okay, so let's look at the idea about intent and agency. What we recognise is that intent and agency are something which are key on the fundamentally when it comes to law and how legal proceedings do. We don't just judge people based on the consequences of what they did or based on the victim themselves. We often include agency and the idea of intent within it. We point, for example, to the idea that if you're decided that you did not have the intent of the agency to do something, then you often take away the criminal intent about that, for example, diminished responsibility. If it is found that you do not have the capacity to operate with what the law was doing, the ability to comprehend it or go along with what that is, then it is deemed that you are not necessarily responsible for the crime that you have committed. This is important on a couple of levels. The reason why this exists, right, is because agency is, sort of intent is contingent upon agency. The fact that you decided to break that law, the fact that you knew what that law was, or even if you didn't know, you acted against what was there in the first place. I think this is important on a couple of levels. Firstly, because it presumes your ability to understand and comprehend potentially what that law was, and therefore why that was important, and therefore why that exists. That changes when it is that you do not have the agency to be able to do that, because it is understood jurisprudentially that you do not have that capacity to make that decision to operate against the society in which you're living in, which is important. Which means that you need that agency to have that intent in the very first place, and without that intent, it is difficult in order to prove prosecution, or at least it is an acceptable defence on the defence's side, which is what's important about this. So it means that when it is that you are so lacking in your ability to have full agency about what you're doing, that the defence is able to look at the mitigation of the intent about it, that you did not legitimately have the ability to go against the society and against the law, which means that that's important. This matters on a couple of levels. It matters because we always recognise, right, if someone doesn't have the intent, then that means that they are able to try and change or try and have a defence against that crime. It means means that you're not necessarily saying that they're acquitted of it, right? The factual circumstances might be the same, but this is about the degree to which they wanted to do that and go against society which matters. This is important as well, because it's not just automatically we jump on the victim's side. We always have to balance up these individual different aspects of what crimes are, why these people are doing it, and what circumstances led them to commit that crime, and why they wanted to do that. That is why, for example, we have a distinction between hate crimes and normal crimes, right? When it is the intent behind them is different. So intent matters, and is contingent on your agency and your ability to make that decision. No. So let's look at why it is that cultural upbringing is important with this. Because you recognise, right, that when it is that you are immersed in a culture which is so prevalent in you, right, it's what your parents tell you is right, it's what you believe that you're going to have to deal with when it comes to everything that you do, or potentially your afterlife when it comes to religion, or what is going to be facing you. When you're immersed in this, when you've got your parents, you've got your entire family, you've got everyone you're in contact with, you've got your rabbi, you've got your imam, you've got your preacher, whatever. When they're telling you that something is correct and this is something which is important for that, then you are immersed and you believe that this is the correct thing to do, or this is what you're being brought up to believe. It might even be less extreme than all of those things, right? It's just the thing that you're used to and that you know about and that you think is the correct thing to do. When it is that you're immersed in that particular area, it means that you're not acting on a full ability to have the agency to make that intent legitimate. Because when it is that you have all of these things telling you to go in a particular way, it is in a degree coercive in that you don't have the full choice available to make the decision about whether or not this is a right or wrong thing for you to do. That means that you feel that you ought to do this thing, or when you do that action that it's the correct thing to do, or that you are necessarily wrong for doing that. We think that's something that ought to be taken into account when we're assessing people based on their agency and their intent, when it is that they are brought up in this environment in which it is believed that they ought to be doing these things, or not necessarily shunned or attacked for doing those things. We think that that's incredibly important because it shapes the way people operate, and it means that they operate in these particular ways. I think that's important in that we don't necessarily think that they ought to be acquitted. It depends on the circumstances, it depends on the culture, and that's why we think it should be a legitimate defence, and the same with diminished responsibility in other areas in terms of law. These reasons very happy to stand inside.